So, Carla, firstly, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm absolutely thrilled that you are our guest speaker. We've had lots of interest in what you have to say. So, our webinar today, it's about how do you keep postgraduate students engaged and confident across an intensive block delivery. So, a way that many of us are trying to teach today. But firstly, Carla, I want to do a short introduction about you. And so it is really about I think the impact of your work, both nationally and internationally, is probably something that you are very, very well known for. And I think it would be really great if the audience can hear a little bit about that. So you are a professor of marketing at Swinburne. You're also now the director of learning transformation, which is education transformation, which is pretty exciting. So I think it'd be great to hear about that as well. And I think another thing that stands out about you is the regard in which you are held by not just your colleagues, Carla, but also the students, the impact you have on them. And some of the terms that I have heard used about you recently is about your expertise and dedication, but in a time that is very tough, many people reported to me in higher education, is indeed the care, the encouragement people said, and the support that you're offering colleagues. And I think you're doing that today by sharing what you're doing with our community. So a huge thank you to you, a very warm welcome. We'll chat for about 20 minutes and then the audience will have a chance, if okay with you, to ask some questions as well. If we run out of time, we are recording, so we'll be able to pass the recording on to them. So Carla, over to you firstly, and then we can take it from there. Thank you.
No problem. And thanks, Grania, for that introduction. And I always like to hear what colleagues and students are saying, and I appreciate that. But I'm very focused on our student experience, and I'll share my roles, sort of past and present, in a minute. And all of those roles are really centered around the learner and the student experience, which I love. So, as you said, I'm a professor of marketing. And I very recently, probably 8 weeks ago, stepped into the role of Director Education Transformation at Swinburne. And I'm leading a new team that's sort of dedicated to rethinking the way we approach education and I guess thinking about a whole new education model, which is really exciting for 2030. That time's going to pass quickly. But again, the learner is at the center with all of that work.
Yeah.
I've also had roles as academic director of student experience, and I'm on the board of our Swinburne Student Association. So through those roles, very much dedicated to the student experience. My background in marketing is customer experience, and these roles give me a chance to actually apply that to the university.
Fantastic. A very exciting time, Carla, then.
It
So
is.
many new things to come. And as you said, we always love, yeah, that keeping the student at the center of everything. So, Carla, I've got a couple of questions because you deliver specifically in block deliveries was what you did do, which is really quite different to our standard kind of class structure that we have a couple of hours a week and so on. Can you tell the audience a little bit about the specific challenges you faced around student engagement and learning continuity, given that you were delivering in that block mode?
Sure. And I should say that it was only a couple of years ago that we sort of started to pay more attention for this block mode. And it is a valuable proposition for postgrad students, but it's a very different way of teaching and learning. Many challenges. The biggest one was definitely cognitive load, given the intensity of learning. And for me, the intensity of teaching. But I guess in block mode, and these were 3 days, 8:30 till 4:30, so long days, the students are exposed to a significant amount of content and discussion and activities and collaboration and problem solving in that, I guess, a relatively short period of time. So it is very good for immersing students in the learning, in those activities, and sort of deep engagement around key concepts. But it can be very challenging for many to really review and reflect and integrate that learning throughout the day, but also between classes, because these are not consecutive days. So there's a challenge too in keeping them engaged between each sort of workshop day, is what we were calling them. So learning continuity, as you said, so critical because of those gaps between the learning sort of events. And we also rely in between on students sort of recalling those sort of learning concepts and applying them in their assignments. So some big challenges there.
Yeah, that is a lot of challenges because it is very, very different. to what we traditionally do. So some of the things that you had shared that I thought would be great to talk a little bit more about was when students told you that they were feeling overwhelmed and struggling indeed to stay engaged. What did that mean from how you approached the unit, Carla?
Yeah, great question. It definitely reinforced the importance of tuning into student feedback and listening to really what they were saying and responding. And the other reason why that was really important for this particular unit is the unit is customer experience management. These are key principles that are taught in this unit. So students are learning about the importance of understanding customer needs and really from those needs, designing better experiences that meet them. So given that's a learning sort of topic, I had to practice that approach in my teaching of the unit. So, and also, I guess, rather than assuming students needed extra sort of learning content, I tried to focus on opportunities where they could actually integrate the learning and build their confidence. And again, that's within the sort of workshop day, but also in between the workshop days.
Yeah, that building confidence is such a critical thing, isn't it? And as you say, not just on the day, but then how do you keep them engaged until you next see them? Yeah, fantastic. Love
Correct.
it. I have many more questions, Carla. My next one is you embedded Quitch at the end of each workshop day. What was the thinking behind that, giving that long day that the students had?
Yeah, I wasn't sure going in what the right placement was, but it absolutely was at the end of the day. And again, I had sort of an ongoing feedback loop with students, so I could identify through their feedback that it was the right point. But the end of the day was really a natural point where the students needed to pause, but it was the right time that they could actually sort of reflect on what they'd learned throughout that day. So I could have waited until the following week or weeks to do that, but it felt more important and it worked well to have them revisiting those concepts when they were fresh. And it was a nice transition from sort of intense sort of learning and sort of work on them to sort of come into Quitch and have a bit of fun and really wrap up the day with, a gamified sort of revision experience. And they really loved that.
Fantastic. It does seem like a natural fit to me at the end of the day. You want to kind of see what have you learned, and from our point of view as academics as well, it's just a nice way to ensure that that learning has indeed been consolidated, I guess, to memory. Then my next question was around how did you decide what concepts, Carla, to include, and how did you keep it feeling like it was that kind of a natural wrap up that you referred to, rather than indeed students thinking, oh my goodness, it's extra work I need to do now at the end of the day?
Very good question. And I was very aware that there was no way I could include all of the learning content. There's a lot of sort of key concepts and frameworks and theories covered. But I focused on those, firstly, that were covered in that workshop day, because again, I wanted them to reflect and revisit on that really fresh learning experience that they had, but also those that I knew were really critical for them performing and doing well in their assessments. So again, when we think about assessment, there are specific sort of key concepts that they need to apply in those. So working from, I guess, the assessment brief that students would use to perform their assessment, I made sure that those concepts were included. And it was good in terms of, doing it in bite-sized chunks. I sort of worked on the model that no more than 10 questions. It was important that it was a concise set. And that made it feel like a really quick and fun way to test their understanding rather than another learning activity on top of what they'd already done.
Yeah, great. I love that actually. And then it's kind of I think a natural question following that is how did you make sure that the content was aligned to the assessment? And why indeed did that matter?
Yeah, so again, I guess that links to my previous answer. So important, so that students have that sort of depth of understanding to perform their assignments. But we also know, as educators, that students are much more likely to engage when they know there's relevance to the assessment and how they're going to perform through that assessment in the unit. So again, they were deeply sort of connected to those, the key concepts, the thinking, the knowledge they really had to apply in their assessments. and again, based on that specific brief that they would work to develop those assessments. So wasn't necessarily about preparing for an assignment, but it was helping them, again, build that confidence and that foundational understanding to be able to do them well. And of course, beyond assessments, carry that foundational knowledge through to their careers.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, isn't it? There are certain concepts that we must be able to deliver. That, as you said, it's not about passing assignments and whatever, but it is about taking that into the workplace and being able to actually apply that. So yeah, love that you did that. I now have a couple of questions around the student experience and indeed the impact. So how did students respond in the moment when completing the Quitch activity at the end of a long workshop day?
Really well. I again thinking about or knowing the postgrad cohort and how busy they are and they're already working. And again, the day was quite intense in itself. I wasn't too sure how they would engage, but they engaged really well. They loved it. They had fun with it. They saw the purpose in terms of integrating their knowledge and checking on their own understanding. But it was a really, really positive experience. And again, because the activities are really short, they were interactive, they were relatively easy to complete, it did really come across and it was experienced as a really helpful wrap up rather than an extra task that I was bolting on to the big day of learning. And they also really valued, and again, I was able to identify this through the feedback coming through, but they valued a really quick and easy way in that moment, but that they could go back to check their understanding. And again, confidence going into each assignment.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about confidence quite a bit because it is such a critical thing. And I know in designing Quitch, one of the things students wanted was that personalized feedback. But how do you do that at scale when we're all as busy as we are? So that's something they've said to me, that really they're interested to understand what it is they don't know rather than indeed what they do. So that traffic light system that was built that we can identify, okay, I have not mastered this content. And then they talked about going back and getting a better knowledge of it, going back to the material. So I think that has been a really great loop as well.
Absolutely.
In terms of what you're saying there about their response. And then, Carla, what do you think made repeated short revisions, so which is about that short, bite-sized gamified learning, as you said, what is it you think that made it so effective for that technical kind of customer experience content specifically? Because you do have quite technical content there.
Yeah, in the unit and in this discipline area, I guess there are many sort of frameworks and concepts. There's a little bit of theory, but it's very practically relevant theory that and tools that are covered. So I think it worked really well because students could actually, again, test their understanding and through repeated testing of that understanding, really master those concepts before they applied them in their assignments again. And CX is also a very real world, highly practical area. So it allowed them to really test that in that context as well. So it was good to reinforce all those foundations. I could see that they were able to really, achieve that mastery or at least an increased level of recall. And enable them again to build those connections and integrate that knowledge over time. So over the course of the semester, but again, those big 3 workshop days, I could see that consolidation was happening.
Yeah, fantastic. There is a question from the audience, if you're happy to take that now, Carla.
Sure.
And that is, someone has asked, can you speak about the challenge of short attention spans?
Yes, I can. And that was one of the, I guess, design principles that I took for this unit in designing the workshop days, but certainly also the purpose of bringing Quitch into the classroom. And my learning activities, my teaching activities were certainly designed around that. They were deep activities, but they were never sort of too long in duration or felt too long for students. They were very active and students were collaborating and working together. So I'm sure the time didn't feel as long as what it was. But also Quitch really gave me the ability to deliver on that too. So short, sharp quizzes, super relevant to the content they had throughout the day. But I think importantly, off the back of that short attention span, they got that instant check, that instant sort of read on where they were at. And again, they could come back and repeat that. So I think it also delivers in that way too.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, yeah, that instant feedback, as you said, with the short, yeah, focus span, I think it just kind of really works very well together. And I think you've already answered this one. You talked about it supporting students to self-assess and take ownership of their own learning. So it was very much, I think,
Correct.
empowering them is what students have talked about in the past.
Agree, agree. I think that's a big part of it. And we do try to embed sort of self-directed learning through the way we sort of design and deliver our units. So it definitely helps encourage them and empower them to do that. And again, build that confidence where they really need it.
Mm.
So they've got that read and they know where maybe their understanding, their gaps in understanding are, and they can sort of boost their confidence by honing in on those knowledge gaps.
Love that, love that. And then, Carla, one of the other things, of course, in Quitch is that gamification and the concept of the leaderboard. So, in terms of you had, there were MBA students, I understand, the postgraduate unit. How did that leaderboard work in that context with the postgraduate students
Yeah,
specifically? I'm interested to know.
good question. Again, this was something I was unsure about for the postgrad cohort, but it definitely worked better than I expected. So again, they had fun with it. It encouraged them to re-engage with those gaps in understanding and come back and really sort of boost their confidence and performance in the leaderboard. But I'll also admit that I myself had a bit of fun with it. I did have some small prizes that I offered at the end of each workshop day, based on their positions in that leaderboard, on that leaderboard. And that was good because it created a bit of friendly competition and it gave them just that, an extra boost and in their sort of getting in and engaging with Quitch. But for most students, what I would say is it really motivated them to, again, track their progress. And if they needed to, work towards improving their understanding over time.
Which is exactly what we all want as academics, want to empower them to
Absolutely.
take that on themselves. Carl, I know I said I'd come to the audience questions at the end, but there's another question now, but I think it aligns with where you are. So if you don't mind, I might ask you that one now. This person asking, did you utilize the gamification aspect, the leaderboard, which you've just talked about, achievements? Was there class competition and did you give any rewards? So I think this question, I think you've kind of answered all of that at this point. But yeah, so it's interesting how well that worked for you.
Yeah,
You
really
know, I
well.
think, yeah,
And in hindsight, I probably didn't need to offer those prizes, but I
yeah,
think again at the end of a really big, intense day of learning, it just allowed me to have a bit more fun with it,
yeah,
instill a bit of healthy competition. It just sort of added an element or sort of elevated the
yeah,
activity
yeah,
by doing that. But I probably didn't need
yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Just an extra layer of fun.
Yeah, I actually agree because I have done that myself, and I have to say, I think it works very well. People have a lot of fun with it. They want to see who's going to get the result. It kind of lightens everything up at the end of the day, and as you say, just adds a bit of fun to it. So I think you've answered that question very well.
And I might just add,
Yes,
Bronya, if I
please, yeah,
can,
yeah,
again, coming back to the nature of this unit, it's customer experience management, and another big principle that the students learn and they work through, surprise and delight. If there are opportunities to surprise and delight customers, and of course, in this context, our students, we know that that really elevates their satisfaction. So it also allowed me to sort of link into those learning concepts as well.
I love that actually, surprise and delight. That's a great way to drive our whole strategy on student experience, isn't it? We talk about it in industry, but yeah, I love that, Carla. Um, I have come now as we get kind of towards the end of this, and we will answer any more questions if people do have them. But we have about reflection now and advice when you look back. So looking back, what do you think made this work? So was it maybe timing, content management or alignment, the gamification, or something else indeed?
I think it was all of that. It was no
Mm.
sort of single aspect to it. The timing was really important because, again, it created that natural point for reflection and revision at the end of that very intense and long teaching and learning workshop day. The content was really aligned, and I think it was quite explicitly aligned with what the students had learnt that day and what they needed to sort of work with and apply in their assignments. And I think the gamification element, it just made it, more fun, more enjoyable, rather than that, again, adding something else to the day. But I think for students, and again, if I were to summarize their feedback, it was also a genuine sort of need that they had. And again, these workshop days were intense. Sometimes there were 3 or 4 weeks in between the next one, like until the next one. So again, gave them that opportunity to stay engaged. And I'd also like to think it was part of my great teaching, which I'm very focused on too. But I think that helped. We did both have fun, myself and the students, with the activity.
Yeah, which is so important, though. It really is. I remember when I was initially designing Quitch and students talked about we want to have fun. I thought, really, this is great. And I thought, that's fantastic. As long as you have fun and learn at the same time, even better, because we know if it's going to be a great experience, you're going to remember that so much better than if you're feeling like it's a chore, which was some of the things, that students can have talked about. I'm loving this. I think there's so much to take away from this, Carla, but if you can bear with me, I've got a couple of more questions for you. One was in terms of how do you see tools like Quitch connecting to your broader goal, which you have a broader goal of linking learning, industry, and indeed impact. And I know you're very big around impact, which is very important.
Absolutely. We are, as an institution, and I guess in my teaching practice up until very recently, very focused on helping students translate that knowledge that they're gaining and those skills they're developing into capabilities. And really those capabilities are things that students need to learn, they're outcomes we need to say that they've achieved through studying various units and courses, but also those that we know employers are looking for. So, Quitch and tools that are similar, they really help, again, students build confidence around those key foundational concepts. They can spend more time, if they need to, deepening that knowledge or, improving that knowledge and applying it to industry context. And certainly, again, CX being such a practical, still very much an emerging field, very applied, that was really important. So I guess to sum up, strengthening those foundations, I think make those learning experiences more impactful. And Quitch really allowed me to do that, and colleagues similarly to do that.
Yeah, that's good. That's, an important point as well about that. It is an emerging field. So yeah, so how do you ensure that, you are delivering what industry is looking for? So I love the fact that you talk there about focusing on those capabilities and making sure when you're sending these people out to work that indeed they're kind of ready to hit the ground running, which is just fabulous. And yeah, your whole co-designing approach, Carla, is admirable, I've got to say. It's very brave too, actually. A lot of people have said to me, which it is. There's no question of that. So I have my final question for you is or comment, I guess. What advice would you give learning designers working with block or intensive delivery models? Because it is, as we said, a different way of our standard way of delivering.
It is. And certainly something we're going to be doing a lot more of at Swinburne. But I think what I would say is it's very important from the outset to really think and design carefully for what happens within and between those intensive learning events. It's a really powerful model, or it can be a really powerful model, but there are students that they do need those structured opportunities to sort of reflect and revisit on their learning, and again, practice and consolidate the knowledge that they're gaining. But I think sometimes, small interventions like this can have a really big impact if they're aligned to what students are sort of saying and what we know that they need, but also if they're sort of really thoughtfully embedded in that learning journey. And I would say that I felt that it really was, and the student feedback that was shared with me said that it was. So I think that's really important, that it's embedded, it's not bolted on, it actually forms part of that learning experience quite naturally.
Yeah, fantastic. No, I love that. Carla, in summary, I'm going to kind of put together a few of the key things I think you talked about here, and then I'll see if there's anything additional that you would like to add for the audience. So firstly, when we talk about the block mode, you talked about those challenges from the student perspective. There's that cognitive load, absolutely, but also from the educator perspective, it is very, very intensive to deliver great teaching and learning for an entire day like that. It's a big challenge. So I love that what you wanted to do was to reinforce that student kind of feedback or their so they were learning about customer experience and how do they do that when they go out into the workplace. So you wanted to focus on building their confidence and doing this at the end of the day, you felt was like a nice kind of wrap up of the day. It was light. You gave out prizes. People could get personalized feedback in terms of exactly where they were. So it would empower them as individuals to focus on perhaps what they didn't know and what they needed to, get back to that material and have another read through. You also talked about the depth of understanding. So, from the student's perspective, you could always also see those analytics and identify very clearly where there was gaps and where you needed to go back and perhaps deliver that additional to ensure that they had that depth of the understanding. And the students, you said, responded really well to doing that at the end of the day, which was great. And also, you felt that it increased their level of recall, which I love. That was, I think, is an important one there. You based it all around design principles, which I know is something the audience will have loved to hear about today. And the self-directed learning was the focus as well for your postgraduate unit, and it did work very well for that. You talk about keeping them engaged, and my favorite part of this, I think, is about how you talked about the surprise and delight for your students. I just think that's such an important takeaway because, we can get distracted by kind of getting through the content to make sure we're delivering everything we need, but we must make sure that we're giving them that surprise and delight as well. And then the capability building that you mentioned. Carl, is there anything I've kind of missed there?
No, I think that's a great summary, Grania, but I think you've just hit on something there that I haven't spoken to yet that is really important by design for units like this. In that is that you can't expect, in terms of the volume of learning that probably sits in a more typical unit delivery, being a semester long, 12 weeks, it's really hard to fit that into sort of 3 times a full day. So again, doing that and sort of squeezing it in and trying to ensure that students are sort of, they're following that sort of scaffolded learning that you're designing in, that ability to create these checkpoints for assessing their learning and again revising that learning or coming back to things that maybe they needed a bit more time to sort of master is even more important. So I just wanted to reinforce that point that we probably hadn't covered just yet.
Carla, can I say a huge thank you on behalf of everybody that is here today? And hopefully it's okay with you if they follow up, if they have any questions, we'll share your email if that's okay.
Of
But
course.
also too, Carl, in terms of the impact you do yourself make, and I think I just wanted to reiterate again, given the tough time in higher education, what academic colleagues talked about you in terms of that care, that encouragement, and that support. And I think if we can all take that on board as a community as well, in terms of sharing best practice, what we've learned, what we could do better to improve that student experience and that surprise and delight for students, I think is a fabulous way to wrap up the day. So, Carla, huge thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And thanks for sharing all of this with our community today. We really appreciate it. And thanks to the audience for joining us as well.
Thank you, Grania, and thanks to the audience also from me.
Thank you, Carla.